everyone, it's Rishma, Occupational Therapist from OT for Life. I hope you're all doing well. Just carrying on with the videos on stress management and the link between communication and stress. And in the last video, we talked about assertive communication, and that being one of the better ways or more effective ways to manage your stress is by communicating in an assertive way rather than aggressive or passive. Today, I actually want to talk about the things we say without saying a word. So what I'm talking about here is our nonverbal communication, right? So things like our facial gestures, our body language, the tone of our voice, our eye contact. These are all ways that we send messages to others without actually saying any words, right? So for example, if you've ever heard someone say, "Oh, he's really nice once you get to know him," that's actually what they're talking about. Is if you go by your first impression of that person, you might think that that person's not a very nice person, but if you take the time to actually get to know them on the inside, then you'll find that they're actually a nice person, right? So every single one of us gives off messages from our own body language, and a lot of times we're actually not aware of the messages we're sending through our own nonverbal communication, right? So a couple of things that are really important to think about. One is to really observe yourself and really try to understand what messages are you actually giving with your own nonverbal communication. Are you someone who smiles all the time or hardly ever smiles? Are you someone who, do you have people saying to you, "Oh, you looked really angry, so I didn't really approach you that day," right? Like stuff like that. If you have people sort of saying those kinds of things, then those are messages to you that your nonverbal communication is saying that you're angry, right? By the expression on your face, maybe your eyebrows are furrowed together. So think about what messages you might be giving out, and if the messages that you're giving out, with your nonverbal communication actually match how you feel on the inside, that's great, right? But it's when our nonverbal communication is actually sending the opposite message to what it is that we want it to send, is where we have tensions, right? Where we have misunderstandings and miscommunications, and things like that. So the first thing is to really be aware of what messages you yourself might be sending. But the next thing is to be aware of what assumptions or judgments are we making based on someone else's nonverbal communication to us, right? So for example, if someone looks really ticked off and they're kind of abrupt, maybe we may take that and decide, well, maybe they're just not as nice as we thought they were, or maybe they're upset with us, or they're just being rude. Or it isn't until we actually take that extra step to double check, to sort of say, "Hey, are you okay? Is everything okay? You're kind of looking like you're not really having a good day today." It isn't until we do that we actually will know the truth, right? Because then we'll find out from them what it is that they're actually feeling or going through, or whether we're actually even right about what the judgments or assumptions that we're making. But the studies show that when there is a difference between what someone says with their words and the messages that they're giving without their words, so with their nonverbal communication. The listener, in the majority of the time, will actually believe the messages from the nonverbal communication versus the words that are actually coming out of the person's mouth. So that's what the studies show, and that's really, really important to know, because what that means is, as human beings, we will more than likely make our own assumptions and decisions about someone, not based on the words that come out of their mouth, but more based on their nonverbal communication. What is it that they're telling us through their body language? What is it that they're telling us through the tone of their voice? What is it that they're telling us through their eye contact? And what I mean by that is, there are different ways to communicate, whether we're open or whether we're closed. If somebody sits like this, usually means that they're not really open to what you're saying. Maybe they don't believe what you're saying. But if somebody's leaning forward and they're talking to you, this is a more open way to talk, right? People who don't make eye contact when you're talking to them give off a sense that, they don't really care, that you're not important enough to them for them to actually look at you and make eye contact with you, right? People who don't smile, right? It can always be misconstrued as being rude or, not being a very nice person or something like that. Not being sincere or genuine, right? But I think that we've all been in situations where we have been misunderstood based on our nonverbal communication, right? And so if we've been in that situation, then chances are we've probably misunderstood someone else's nonverbal communication. The other really important thing to understand is that for the majority of us who do actually tend to believe more of the nonverbal, what we do then is we take the history that we have with that person. Perhaps we've had this happen before in the past. Maybe this is not the first time. And then those assumptions that we make about that person, we actually turn them into fact, and we really do believe that they're true. So we really do believe that this person is being rude to us, or we really do believe that this person is not treating us properly, or we really do believe that this person is being abrupt to us, or that they're disrespecting us. And imagine the stress and tension that causes us, like in our mind and in our heart, but also with our relationships with that person. So I would just say, think really, and there's one more thing in terms of the nonverbal communication is listening, right? So what are your listening skills like? When someone's talking to you, is your mind spinning in the sense that you are waiting for your turn to sort of reply, right? Because maybe you totally get what they're saying and you have an example in your life that you want to share with them, right? So is that what's happening when someone is talking to you? When they're talking to you, are you really focused on what it is that they're saying because you really want to understand what they're saying and how they are experiencing what it is that they're telling you? Because when we are listening to reply, we're actually not listening, right? We're not listening because we are formulating our next thought, our next interjection. As soon as we get a chance, we're going to jump in there and we're going to say what we need to say, right? But we're not actually listening then. So active listening is a really, really important part of effective communication. And it's another part of the nonverbal, right? So it has nothing to do with the words. It's how well do we actually listen? And so this is something you can also observe about yourself, is when you're having a conversation with someone, observe what's actually happening in your brain. Are you very quickly trying to get in there and say what you need to say? Or are you actually just focusing on what they're saying and not worrying about whether, yes, I've experienced this before, or, oh, you think you've had a bad day, listen to my day. If you're not doing those things and you're just focusing on them and you're wanting to really understand what it is that they're trying to tell you, then you're actively listening. And when someone's actively listening, that's also a part of effective communication, because we've all been in a situation where we might have been pouring our heart out to someone and, you know, they turn around and say, for example, oh, you think you've had a bad day? Listen to my day. How do we feel? We feel not heard, right? We feel like, oh, wow, I just poured out my heart to you and nothing. Like, you're just turning it around and making it about yourself, right? We've all been in that situation. We know that, right? And so, but it's very, very easy as human beings to see when someone else maybe is not perfect, but it's definitely not as easy to turn the mirror to ourselves and really see ourselves in terms of how am I actually listening to someone when they're talking to me, right? Am I actually focused on them, or am I thinking of my own things and wanting to just interject with my own stories, right? So the nonverbal communication, the messages that we send with our gestures and all of that stuff, as well as how effectively do we listen, all of these things roll up into how effectively we actually communicate. And how effectively we actually communicate will determine the level of stress that we might feel inside of ourselves, but also the level of angst that you may have in some of your relationships. So I would say observe yourself. Now that you know, observe yourself and see. And if you realize that the nonverbal messages you're sending don't actually match what you want them to match, then you can change that, right? So once you become aware of it, then you can actually change it. And so if you realize, well, maybe I don't really smile, you know, as much as I should, you know, because maybe people think I'm a little bit aloof or whatever, or guarded, well, then you can start to smile a little bit more, right? And you can change that about yourself. And when you start to change, you start to notice that it makes a difference in your interactions with people, right? So I hope that was helpful. We'll carry on with the series about stress management. It's really important, I think, when managing our stress, because so much of our stress actually comes from within, right? As we've talked about, it's so important to just reflect, know yourself, get to understand yourself, and just observe yourself interacting so that you can understand yourself better. And once you've made observations and you've come to some conclusions about, you know, how you communicate and how you interact, then you can decide, okay, is this actually working for me or not? Is there some room for improvement? And you can definitely reach out and get help to start setting goals so that you can start to make some changes and improvements in your life. So until next time, friends, take care and stay safe out there. Bye.